Hello and welcome to today's live on leadership and storytelling. A lot of the time, the work that I do is around ERG leaders and, in a way, leaders who are not traditionally thought to be leaders. And it's about understanding how they can articulate their stories, how they can be visible, and how they can use storytelling to as a leadership tool. And it's very interesting the reaction and the comments that I hear around storytelling and around visibility with ERG leaders, so with leaders from employee resource groups, because many times, because their title is not necessarily linked to their role in the organization, because their ERG title and leadership is not linked to their specific day-to-day job in the organization, oftentimes there is this struggle of calling themselves leaders. So today we are going to have this conversation. We are going to talk about why ERG leaders need to tell their stories, why the ERG need to articulate their story as well, and how to do it. And I'm going to do it in conversation with someone else. But before I introduce the guest today, my name is Beatrice Kabutakapua. If you haven't caught the previous live and the previous recording, I am the founder and CEO of a company called the Business Storytelling Center. And what we do at the Business Storytelling Center is training and coaching leaders so that they are able to be more visible and advance in their career. They're able to communicate the vision and the culture of the company in a more clear and engaging way, but they're also able to use storytelling as a tool for leading their teams in an authentic way. In the past few weeks, we have been coming live and we have been talking about different aspects around leadership and storytelling. And you can catch all of the recordings. I will actually put them in the comments as well so that you can rewatch them as well. And this is a series that I've created to share some myths about storytelling, how to use storytelling strategically, why it can be hard for leaders to articulate their stories, to find their stories as well, and also why storytelling is so important when it comes to bonding within the teams and developing that sense of belonging. And today we are going to talk about ERG leaders and storytelling. Before I introduce our guest today, I wanted to remind you that what I share during this live is obviously the theory behind storytelling and leadership. It's what needs to be done. It's the lessons that I've learned by working with our clients. It's their perspective as well. But there is obviously a gap between the thing that you hear and then implementing what you have heard. So in order to fill this gap, we have created a workshop, an in-person session that we will be running on June 6th in London. I'm going to share the details to that as well in the comments. But if you have any questions about it, you can message me. But the core of the session is really about understanding what the framework is to be a leader who shares stories. And in particular, we are going to focus on finding those stories. So many times, the leaders I work with, they understand what the storytelling process is, how it helps them to be more visible, how it helps their teams as well. But then they're struggling to find out what the stories to share actually are. And this is what we are going to focus on the session on June 6th. So if you are interested in putting the theory in practice, definitely join on June 6th in London. It will be at lunchtime. So if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments or you can send me a message. All right, now it's time to introduce our guest today. And while I do, if you are connecting live, and even if you are rewatching this replay after, let me know in the comments where you are connecting from and why the topic of leadership and storytelling interests you. So, two questions: where you are connecting from, and why the topic of leadership and storytelling interests you. Now, today we are going to talk in particular about how ERG leaders can leverage storytelling for visibility, for leadership, for communication. And we are going to talk about it with the person I work with. His name is Obinai Wuji. He is a global partnership manager and content partnership manager and co-lead for the ERG called Roots at Wave Maker. And let's give a round of applause to Obina. Hello.
Hey, round of applause. Thank you for the intro.
Thank you so much for joining today. And I already feel like this is just a one to one conversation.
Forget the audience. It's just us today. It's all right. Yeah.
But definitely it's not, because I also want to make sure that we hear like the comments and the questions that they have and where they are connecting from, but also why they are interested in leadership in storytelling. So we are not ignoring you, it's just that we love having a laugh during our conversation. Okay, Obina, please introduce yourself as well and tell us what you do. But like, I gave a bit of the title,
Yeah,
but I want people to hear what it looks like, what you do.
sure thing. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure. Working with you is always a pleasure. So now we get to just chat, and I don't mind that. So, hi everyone. My name is Obina, as Beatrice said. So, I work as a global content and partnerships manager at Wavemaker, and I'm glad that you asked not what you do, but could you actually describe what it is? Because a lot of the times titles are just out there, but we don't know what anyone does. So, happy to sort of paint a picture. Essentially, my role is if you're a company or a brand and you're trying to market yourself to your audience in whatever way, shape, or form, when you work with me and my department, we focus on partnering you with a publication in order to amplify your voice, right? So let's say you are British Gas and you want to be known as the best gas supplier, even though you're not. I'm joking. Joking. If anyone's from British Gas here, sorry, I was joking. I'm joking. But let's say you want to be known as that. So my role would be to understand your audience and understand where your audience are and where they will listen to, and find a publication or some sort of media outlet that would hit the audience in the way that you need in order to best resonate with them. We would then come up with this custom content package, whether that be articles, videos, documentaries, podcasts, da 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 content world. And for money, we're able to create that package and get that campaign out for you. I also end up working with influencers as a result of this as well. We have an internal influencer agency by the name of Goat, and we work with them when we want a bit more of an influencer strategy, and we also do some bespoke creative production as well. Hopefully that gives you a more of a description than me just run. I could talk about my job all the time. Um, but yeah, so that's what I do. And then outside of that, I'm also co-lead, though I am actually handing the reins over, co-lead for Wavemaker Roots in Wavemaker. And so, yes, Beatrice, eyes open. Yes,
Breaking news.
breaking news, breaking news. But yeah, so what that employee resource group does is that we focus on cultural diversity in advertising in a nutshell. Yeah, we talk about representation, we talk about how to do it better in work, we talk about inclusivity within the workplace. It's quite a large umbrella, but that's a summary of what we do there.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Obina. And it's interesting what you mentioned, right? Because I remember we had this conversation as well. Like,
Hmm.
we give people the title, and I can also remember when I will tell people, oh, I work as a business storytelling coach, and
Yeah,
then people have to make the effort to understand what does that mean, what it looks like. And I think that one of the first conversations that we had was really around this, around the fact that you want to make sure that you share with people what you do, like in pictures, in a way. Like,
yeah,
what does it look like
yeah.
on a day-to-day basis? So my invitation to everyone who is listening live or rewatching this, let us know in the comment the title of what you do, and we will try to guess what that looks like.
Oh gosh. Okay, let's see how that goes. Let's see how that. But you're absolutely right. It's interesting because when I talk to people about my job, when I just say we work with partnerships, they're just like, okay. And then when I say we created this with CNN, they're just like, oh, okay, okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, we did that thing with Vogue. Oh, Vogue. Oh yeah. Oh no. Okay, I get you. Or we worked with influencers. Influencers. Ooh. Well, yeah, it's the idea of how do you bring to down to earth this ethereal thing that we do, which I think also leads into the conversation we're having today, bringing down to earth the
Yeah,
value of the things that we do too. Um,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And this is also something that we have done together. So my next question will be to share a little bit of how we connected and why.
Yeah, sure thing. So, as I said before, I'm also co-lead for Wavemaker Roots, and I do a lot of speaking things in my company. And after doing that for quite a bit, a few people were coming up to me and saying, "Hey, we really love your public speaking. We really love how you talk. We struggle with this because of this, that, or this other reason." A lot of them were coming from like I guess marginalized communities or immigrant backgrounds, and so they were just like, "Oh, my accent, I don't feel very comfortable. Oh, when I'm talking one on one, I'm fine, but when it's going to a group, I don't feel as confident. Oh, I'm not sure if this client is hearing me clearly, so I'd rather not speak than to speak." A lot of really a lot of confidence issues, but it lended over to the whole public speaking thing. And so from that, seeing that need, we created this thing called Wave Talks, which is two platforms. So one, we did public speaking workshops in which we were empowering people and helping people get over that, understanding the type of speaker that they are, and just practicing the craft of public speaking, really. And so we did a number of workshops like that. And then we also have Wave Talks, which is an event where 5 minutes, 5 slides, 5 people during lunchtime, they just speak to their fellow colleagues about whatever topic that they're passionate about according to the theme. And so we were doing these workshops for a while, and we started thinking, okay, we want to do different topics. We want to, branch out a bit. And more than anything, we also want some outside experts coming in too. Because one thing about me talking my life away is another thing to get an actual proper coach come in and coach like a coach. And so, Beatrice, your name popped up, and we had those initial conversations, and bing, bang, boom, you came into the office and did an electrifying session for our people, which they loved. And yeah, since then it's just been there. So yeah, so that's how we got to connect.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many things that you pointed out and so many things that made me laugh as well. But yeah, I love that you summarize it like that, and that you also explain like the background information, and also the fact that so many, even for the work that I do, so many times I hear leaders who don't have English as a first language
Mm,
feeling so self-conscious about that. And it's a very interesting thing, first of all because English is not my first language, so I can really relate to that, but also because it's interesting because we think we need to focus on the form of what we say, on the way we share the story, on the accent, or on the how perfect the slide is. But the actual thing that it's most important is whether the audience is receiving the story or the information.
mm.
And sometimes people get so self-conscious about everything else that then they miss the actual point of sharing. So it's something that it's really relatable and it's interesting. It's something that I've seen so much as well.
Absolutely. And whenever that happens, I think I actually put out a post about this recently because it's a common thing that people just tend to bring up. I have a Nigerian background, so I grew up around that, so I feel like there's some kinship there as well. But what I bring up all the time is Arnold Schwarzenegger. I can't even pronounce his name. Arnold Schwarzenegger, yeah, actor, Austria. People could barely understand what he was saying when he first arrived. He even said it himself, and yet he became a politician in a country that he was not from, right?
Yeah.
He has one of the most famous quotes, "I'll be back," right? And the reason why that was famous wasn't because he said it in a really posh British accent, I'll be back. It wasn't because he said it in an American accent. I don't know how to do American accent, but he said it in the way he said it. He said it with his own approach, his own background. He put his own personality into it, accents and all. And now we're all saying, I'll be back. Even Jackie Chan, he complained a lot, for example, that no, he didn't complain, but I saw there's many interviews of him saying, I don't understand English. I don't understand what these people are saying. But in Rush Hour 2, he was making us all laugh. So, the accent thing, yes, but it's more of an internal point of insecurity rather than an actual barrier to people understanding you, right?
Mhm.
We don't need to go into a talk about that, but it's a thing, obviously.
No, it is, but it also links well to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which
Yeah.
is the fear
Mm,
of sharing stories as ERG leaders. And I'm going to ask to you what you have seen, but from my perspective, some of the things that I've seen is a lot, not much about the, being in public or sharing the stories, but it's also about the idea of calling yourself a leader and just embracing that.
mm,
And, having not feeling like a leader, whatever that it's supposed to look like,
yeah.
and that portrays to the fear of sharing, of speaking in public, of being the storyteller in the room. But I'm
Mm.
curious to hear from you what the challenges you have seen are when it comes to ERG leaders sharing stories.
Okay, ERG leaders sharing stories. So I'll speak about myself and then I'll speak about what I've seen, if that helps. So personally, I think one of the things that made me a bit reticent at first, I talk a lot, so it didn't hold me back very much, but I was very conscious of it, was the fact that, you know, ERGs and just in general, a lot of issues when it comes to hitting inequality in the workplace still looks like a nice to have than a business priority, right? So, especially after the whole George Floyd thing, we had 3 passionate years where, for example, Black people mattered. 3 years have passed now. They don't matter as much, but they're there, you know? Jokes, obviously. But yeah, it's this idea that you are putting your face to something that perhaps isn't as relevant as your actual job role. And so obviously there is a worry that you'll then get pigeonholed in your career in the long run in being known as the person who speaks out for these sorts of things. But they forget that, oh, you are actually a 10-year seasoned data professional, or forget that you have done multiple successful award-winning campaigns as a marketeer, and all they now see is this part. And so I think that gives a lot of fear about speaking out specifically within this role. And then obviously there's a double edge to it. So there's a fear of that, but at the same time, one could argue your fears is going to pull back the issue, right? Because
Yeah.
the issue is less what you're saying important, because it is. It's more about how are you marketing what you're doing to be business relevant. In the world of advertising, London, right? We make what 8 point. We're I don't know 800 million or 8 million, something like that. We're a number of population. Close to 46% of it are minorities, right? So when it comes to marketing, if London is your target market, for example, and you're unable to speak the language of those people due to your lack of inclusivity, that means you're missing out on almost half of the possible revenue that you could be getting. That's a completely different argument than we need to protect people's rights, which is important. But for a business, right, the angle changes a bit. And so I think there's a challenge for ERG leaders to rephrase or re-understand their role and make it more business relevant. Because at the end of the day, we are business relevant. We're not just a nice type, we are business relevant. I talked for a bit there, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, I was taking notes. No, it's true because you mentioned the connection between lack of confidence and lack of and the way that ERGs are, they perceive themselves as being a nice to have, and that's something that makes leaders a little bit less confident in, being outspoken, in sharing stories, but also the fact that it's very important to share the business relevance of
Mm.
ERGs. And that's such an important point. And sometimes, from what I've seen, sometimes it's so clear from the outside the impact that ERGs have, but then internally, people might not see it, leaders might not see it.
Right.
And that's why then sharing the stories and articulating the impact of what people do in the ERGs, it's so important, because then you are actually making the case in a way of the for the creation of the employee resource group, but
Yeah.
also for what happens after, like the change that they bring, the all the positive things that they bring to the company. From the external perspective, I'm always so amazed. I'm like, how do you not see how
Yeah.
important the work that you do is? And that's also one of the reasons why when I work with leaders, especially ERG leaders, I always tell them, we always have this exercise, which I think we did as well, where you have to rephrase how your job, so that you highlight the actual impact of the job on the business rather
Yeah.
than the title. Because then when you do your, in a way, your elevator pitch, or when you're meeting with senior stakeholders, you focus on, yes, your name, your title, but primarily on the impact of your work rather
Mm.
than everything else, which is a way to gain confidence, a way to be influential as well. I'm also wondering though, and this is another thing that I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
on a personal level, like on an individual level, what are, because last week we talked about why leaders might, 2 weeks ago, we talked about why leaders might struggle sharing their stories. And one of the things was around identifying themselves as leaders, but
Mm-hmm.
also like attaching themselves so strongly to whatever their version of their story is. So I'm wondering whether this is something that you have seen as well. Like leaders are like, oh no, I cannot possibly be a leader, so my voice doesn't matter. Or even something like, oh, my story is either too traumatic or not interesting enough, so there's no point in sharing it.
Mm. Mm. Okay. I'll give you two things. One is more relevant to the previous thing, and then the other one is direct answer here. So, um, the impact of the work we do. So, during one of our public speaking sessions, we did like a larger sort of talk, and we are talking about leading with authority. And one individual was saying that for a long time, they came from an Indian background, and for a long time, they didn't feel comfortable putting that in public. They didn't like the idea that people knew or talked about their culture very much, and so whenever they came to work, they were just very British, not didn't know anything about it. They put that on that persona
Mm.
really strong. And then at one point, we were getting a client who was from India. It was an Indian client, really big company, a lot of money, and we were talking with them. And during that conversation, initial, relationship where you're trying to say, are we a good fit for each other? Sort of conversation, dating essentially. um, they started talking about randomly childhood.
Mm.
And this one person was the only one in that room that could relate because he had a similar background. And so they both started doing jokes about growing up in India and that sort of thing. And that client loved that person and loved working with that person so much that we ended up winning that business. So when we talk about confidence and public speaking, this is what we mean. If that person felt so ashamed of who they were and weren't even able to speak, then that point of relationship, because business is a lot of times, as you know, it's about relationships. That point of relationship may have not happened because they felt like, oh, my story isn't important. Oh, I'm not cool enough. I'm not higher enough, whatever. And that would have stopped them from talking, but because they did, the connection was able to make and the business made money, right? And so there are direct results about building confidence within your communities at work. And that's the point that I want to bring there.
Mm-hmm.
So in regards to your question, leaders and confidence being taken the role and the title as leader, I have seen it, and a lot of it just goes back to that previous point. It's the idea of that what they're leading, they don't seem as valuable enough to be respected as a leader, even though they are managing a team. Yes, volunteers are a team too. Yes, you are organizing something and you have deadlines, and you are managing a team in order to meet that deadlines that you put in place, and you are held accountable by higher stakeholders. So you are leading a team, you are a
Yeah.
leader, but you don't necessarily recognize it because you're doing it out of quote unquote the kindness of your heart or a thing on the side. And I think that's where it comes from. A lot of it is context. People
Mm.
still don't feel the importance of the context at which they're working within. And I think that is what ends up making them a bit less wanting to call themselves a leader, even though they are. And of course, there's always that bit that you actually hired to do a specific job, right? And so, yes, you're leading that thing, but if perhaps you feel you're not I guess the most meritable at your specific job, you may feel a bit of what's the word, contradiction, right? And that
Mm.
you're selling in one thing and maybe not in the other, which is okay. But I'll have no one leader is great at everything, and that's why there's delegation. And that's why there is a career path in which you can choose where to move. But yeah, I think that's more, there's the context in which they see themselves in. And I think that's where the issue comes with calling themselves a leader was. When I grew up, I'm going to stop talking in a bit, I promise. But when I grew up, my mom was very harsh on me and saying, Obi, you are a leader. You have no choice. You have to lead. You are not the tail, you are the head. So I had no choice. Coming out the womb, I was like, leader. It just was a thing about me, right? And it ended up pushing me to do those sorts of things within whatever role I end up doing. So that's just was built in me. But not everyone had a mom like my mom. So it's also learning to build that titled into you. You know what I mean? Because not everyone grew up with the idea that I could be a leader. And so part of it is learning to be able to identify themselves as that within whatever context that they may be working and living in. Okay, I'm going to shut up now.
Yes, yes, yes. And an applause to your mom. Because it's true that so many times, like if the validation comes from the outside, it's easier.
Mm.
And it also makes me think about the story that I often share, because when I was 12 years old, my teacher told me I was a leader.
Mm.
And I looked at her like,
Excuse me?
what? Why? Leave me alone.
Mm.
And it took me a very, very long time to understand what she meant
Mm.
and what leading looked like for me as well, because that's another thing. And we could
Yeah.
have another whole conversation around this, because we are used to see leadership as being something, but then it's not just one thing. It's
Yeah.
not just one gender. It's not just one age or one heritage. So we really need to take ownership of the world more.
Mm.
This is like another conversation
I
altogether.
was about to launch off. I'm holding back.
One thing that I want to hear from you, and this is something that I discussed last week with a woman from Save the Children, with Rita Girotti. We had a conversation on LinkedIn as well. And one of the things that came out was that even if we have worked together, the first time was 2 or 3 years ago. The work that we did with their team and with her around storytelling was like a gift that kept on giving.
Mm.
Like now she's speaking at conferences and she's looking at what we did together. And I'm wondering if you could share with people some of the um, takeaway or advantages of using storytelling as an ERG leader. What would you think that it would be?
Sure. Number one thing, connection. So, okay, so I'll give an example. I promise I'll be to the point. I promise. I was on a panel and we were talking about bias. We're talking about bias and how it exists. And I gave this story. I'll be really quick. I promise everyone, please don't get tired of me. I'll be quick.
They won't. Nobody will.
I was teaching English in China at some point. Yeah, and I'm quite an energetic person, so I always like to do games and do stuff, really fun. And at one point, we wanted to get the children standing up and doing something really active, really active. And so we all stood up and we went outside, and I had this game. It's called Zip Zap Boing. We were going to play it outside. There was around 30 kids. And yeah, so we all went outside. And in order to play the game, first thing we need to do was all hold hands. And so we're in this big circle, and I start stretching out my hand to the child next to me. And they look at my hand and they're just like, they step back. And I'm like, oh, kids. And then I go to the child on my right and I reach out to them and they look at my hand and they step back. And I was like, what's going on, you kids? Come on. At this point, my Chinese isn't the best. Mandarin wasn't the best. So I was just like, come on. And I tried. And then they started running away. I was like, oh, okay, fine. I then went back. I noticed I was disrupting the class at that point. So I went to sit on a bench and I told my other facilitators how to play the game. And they went ahead and did it. And I was looking at them and I was just like, oh, this is a bit sad. I really wanted to do it, but they were afraid of me for whatever reason. And so I started getting a camera and I was taking pictures. I was showing people the pictures as I was taking them. And that way the kids were warming up to me a bit. And then I got a basketball and I started playing basketball and shooting hoops. And as soon as the kids saw me playing basketball, they ran and jumped on me. They were just like, let's go, Kobe, let's go. We were playing, and now all of a sudden that fear that they had of me before went away. Bias. There's a specific context to which they saw me, and when they saw me outside of the context, they were afraid, but as soon as they saw me within what they understood, they were fine with me. So that story, there's something that it does whenever I tell it, right? That you understand the nuances and you can see what the kids are thinking, but you don't want to say it. You can understand it, right? And that builds a sort of connection with your audience. That level of storytelling is very important because at the end of the day, the point of telling a story is to spread a message. And a lot of the times, stories have a way of hitting through those internal barriers that you have to receiving a strange message. And so storytelling, that's why storytelling is such a powerful tool. Whether you can relate to someone via the story that I just told, a childhood story, someone else's story, it just has a way of breaking down barriers through relation and through connection, because we're all able to put ourselves in the context of that story and feel empathy. That's the word, empathy. And as soon as empathy is there, and as soon as that is present within the system, all of a sudden, any message that has to come lands so much more effectively because their heart is open to you. So that's why storytelling is such an important tool.
Wow. I mean, mic drop. No, I love that. I really love that. I love that you explained it with a story because it really it makes more sense. Like we could sit here and be like, oh yes, our brain reacts better when we have a story, or it's for your career advancement and blah blah. But the truth is that it's much easier to share it with a story, and also you are more you get the attention of the audience
Yeah.
easier. And then people just are there for the what you said, like this, the point of the story is sharing a message. I often say that you're sharing a lesson as well, so people are there waiting for the lesson, waiting for the thing that they can get out of the story. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Well, I'm conscious of the time because I know that this could go on and on and on for a very long time.
Apologies, everyone. I talk way too much. But thank you for your time.
No, do not apologize. You shared very valuable things and stories. So no apologies needed. What I'm going to ask you next, and it's the last question, is there anything else you would like to share that I haven't asked or that didn't come up?
Okay, so this one I can be quite short with. I think we covered a good amount of bases, but I just want to encourage everyone, right? If you are somebody who doesn't feel as confident in whatever background that you have, or I don't know, one thing or another, there's a narrative that you're telling yourself. The most powerful story that anyone can tell is the one that you tell yourself. So please be conscious of the stories you tell yourself. Things you may see yourself as an ordinary or subordinary person, but trust me, if someone else heard your story, their eyes would open and they'll be like, wow. Yeah. So to anyone who needs that encouragement, I want to give that to you. Tell yourself a better story because that's the most important one that you'll ever tell. Yeah, that's it from me.
Yes. Awesome. Obina, thank you so, so much.
Thank
Um,
you.
for everyone who is watching this live or watching it later, if you have your takeaways from this conversation, put them in the comments, connect with Obina on LinkedIn as well, and share your aha moments, your takeaways, your feedback, your questions, your stories, everything that you want to share with us in the comments. Thank you so much, Obina.
Thank you, Beatrice. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so, so much for joining today's live. I'm sure that you got something out of this. Like, I have no doubt, because it was such an interesting conversation, a relatable conversation, and you heard lots of stories. And you heard also about how ERG leaders can leverage storytelling. What is the impact of storytelling as well? So I want to make sure that I hear from you as well. So let me know whether it's in the comments or whether it's a direct message. Let me know your takeaway from this conversation, your feedback, your reflections, anything that came up after this conversation. Please do share it with me. And in the meantime, a reminder that if you want to put the theory into practice, we are running an in-person storytelling session next week on June 6th. It will be centered around a framework that you can use to use storytelling as a leadership tool. And we will be focusing in particular on your stories and how to find them and where to find them, so that you can share them within your team, within your organization, and with the other leaders you work with. This is it for now. I'm looking forward to hearing your aha moments and your feedback in the comments or in the in the messages. We are going to have one last episode from this series, which is going to be on June 3rd. I'm going to send out the invitation to that. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you on Monday. Bye, everyone.